stood in the kitchen, staring at the document Victor had just shoved across the table. My hands trembled as I read the words household contract at the top. He wanted me to sign over control of my inheritance, my late father's inheritance to him. "It's for your own good, Calla," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "You're too young to handle this kind of money responsibly." My mother stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the floor. She wouldn't even look at me. The betrayal burned through my chest like fire. "This is insane," I whispered. Victor's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Sign it or you can find somewhere else to live." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush me. My mother still said nothing. I picked up the papers, my fingers shaking with anger, and tore them cleanly in half. Victor's smirk disappeared. "You'll regret that," he hissed. I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding. My name is Calla, and this is how my mom's new husband tried to control me, until he learned what I really inherited. I locked myself in my room and pressed my back against the door. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any second. Through the thin walls, I could hear Victor's voice rising, sharp and angry. "She's ungrateful," he spat. "After everything we've done for her." My mother's response was quieter, but the words still reached me. "She's just like her father, stubborn and difficult." Those words cut deeper than any insult Victor could throw at me. My own mother had chosen his side. I slid down to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. The house suddenly felt smaller, colder, like the walls were closing in. I thought about my father, about the man who had loved me without conditions, without control. He had been gone for 6 years now, but the pain of losing him felt fresh all over again. Now I was losing my mother too, except she was still standing right in the next room. I remembered the day everything changed, 2 years ago. My mother had been glowing in her white dress, holding Victor's hand like he was her lifeline. She introduced him as a financial consultant, someone smart and successful who would take care of us. Victor had complimented my speech at the reception, calling me kiddo with that practiced charm. I had smiled politely, trying to be happy for my mom. She deserved happiness after losing Dad. But even then, something about Victor felt rehearsed, like he was playing a role he had memorized. The way he touched my mother's shoulder, the way he laughed at exactly the right moments, it all seemed too perfect. My father had been warm and genuine. Victor was polished and calculated. I pushed the feeling away, telling myself I was being unfair. My mother loved him, and that should have been enough. I wanted it to be enough. The rules started small. Victor moved in 3 weeks after the wedding, and suddenly there was a curfew. 10 o'clock on weeknights, midnight on weekends. "It's for your safety," he explained. Then he wanted to check my phone every evening. "No secrets in a healthy family," he said with that same smooth smile. My mother nodded along, agreeing with everything he suggested. When I protested, she laughed it off. "He just cares about you, honey." But it didn't feel like care. It felt like surveillance. He made comments about my clothes, saying some outfits were too revealing for a young lady. He questioned where I went, who I talked to, what I did every single hour of the day. I started keeping a journal, writing down every controlling comment, every boundary he crossed. I hid it under my mattress, the only private thing I had left. The house that used to feel like home was becoming a prison, and Victor was the warden. I came home from school one afternoon to find my bedroom door different. The lock I had used since I was 12 was gone, replaced with one that required a key. Victor was waiting in the hallway, dangling the only key from his finger. "No locked doors in my house," he said casually. "We're a family. Families don't keep secrets." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. "That's my room," I said, my voice shaking. "Not anymore," he replied. "Everything under this roof belongs to the family now." My mother appeared at the top of the stairs, and I looked at her desperately, waiting for her to defend me. She just sighed. "Victor's right, sweetie. We need to trust each other." That night, after they went to bed, I pried up a loose floorboard near my closet. I hid my father's letters there, the ones he had written to me before he died. They were the last piece of him I had, and Victor would never touch them. Dinner 3 months later was when everything shifted. Victor set down his fork and looked at me across the table, his expression casual. "So, Calla, when exactly does your trust fund release?" he asked. I froze, my stomach dropping. I had never told him about the trust, never mentioned it once. My eyes darted to my mother, and her guilty expression told me everything. She had told him. She had shared the one thing my father had left specifically for me. "I'm not sure," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. Victor smiled like he could see right through me. Your 21st birthday, right? That's coming up soon. He reached over and squeezed my mother's hand. We're just thinking about your future, kiddo, making sure you're prepared. But I saw the calculation in his eyes. This wasn't about my future. This was about money, my father's money, and Victor wanted it. The next week, Victor cornered me in the living room with a folder full of financial papers. I've been thinking, he said, sitting down next to me on the couch. When your trust fund releases, you should let me manage it for you. I'm a professional, Calla. I can make that money grow, keep you secure for life. He spread the papers out like he was presenting a business deal. Your mother and I have been discussing it, and we think it's the smartest option. I looked at the documents, my pulse quickening. They were complicated, full of legal terms I didn't fully understand, but one thing was clear. If I signed them, Victor would have complete control over my inheritance. I need to think about it, I said carefully. His expression hardened for just a second before the smile returned. Of course, kiddo, take your time, but don't take too long. He patted my shoulder as he stood up. You'll change your mind. That was when I realized this wasn't about helping me. It was strategy, manipulation, and I was his target. Victor's control spread like a disease through every part of my life. He started telling my mother that my friends were bad influences, kids who would lead me down the wrong path. She believed him without question. My phone privileges were cut. I could only use it in the living room where he could watch. He monitored every text, every call, every social media post. When friends stopped by the house, Victor interrogated them at the door, asking questions that made them uncomfortable. Eventually, they stopped coming. I was isolated, cut off from everyone who cared about me. The house grew smaller with each passing day, the walls closing in tighter and tighter. I felt like I was suffocating, drowning in Victor's need for control. My mother watched it all happen and said nothing. She had become a stranger, someone I didn't recognize anymore. The woman who used to defend me, who used to put me first, had disappeared completely. One night I came home 15 minutes past curfew. I had stayed late at the library studying for finals, and I tried to explain, but Victor cut me off. Rules are rules, Calla, he said coldly. You've broken my trust. The punishment was a week of silent treatment. No one in the house was allowed to speak to me. Victor enforced it like law, and my mother obeyed without protest. For 7 days, I ate meals alone while they sat together at the table, talking and laughing as if I didn't exist. When I tried to apologize, to explain, they turned away. The silence was worse than any screaming match. It cracked something inside me, made me feel invisible and worthless. By the end of that week, I understood exactly what Victor was doing. This wasn't discipline. It was psychological warfare, designed to break me down until I became obedient and compliant. But he had miscalculated. Instead of breaking me, he was making me stronger, more determined to escape. I was cleaning Victor's office one Saturday when I found it, a folder with my name written on the tab in his neat handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were copies of my trust fund paperwork, printouts of emails from the bank, even a photocopy of my driver's license. He had been collecting information about me, building a file like I was some kind of case he was working. There were notes in the margins, calculations, dates circled in red ink. My 21st birthday was highlighted and underlined 3 times. Victor wasn't just interested in my inheritance. He was planning something specific, something that required documentation and preparation. I took out my phone and photographed every page, my heart hammering so hard I thought he might hear it from downstairs. When I put the folder back exactly as I found it, I realized I was no longer just defending myself. I was gathering evidence for a war I hadn't chosen, but was now ready to fight. 2 weeks later, Victor announced a family meeting at his lawyer's office downtown. He made it sound casual, like a simple discussion about future planning. My mother encouraged me to go, saying it would be good for all of us to get on the same page. I agreed, keeping my expression neutral, even though every instinct told me this was a trap. When we arrived, Victor's lawyer handed me a stack of papers. As I read through them, my blood turned to ice. These were legal documents transferring my inheritance into a family account, an account Victor would control completely. It's just a formality, Victor said smoothly. This way, we can all benefit from your father's generosity. My mother nodded beside him, actually nodding like this was reasonable. I pretended to be confused, asking questions and stalling for time. When the lawyer stepped out to take a phone call, I quickly photographed every page with my phone hidden under the table. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Victor's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. Of course, we'll revisit this soon. That night, I contacted Mr. Dalton, my father's old attorney. I had kept his business card all these years, tucked into one of Dad's letters. I sent him the photos I had taken and explained everything that was happening. He called me back within an hour, his voice warm and reassuring. Calla, your stepfather has absolutely no legal claim to your inheritance, he said firmly. Your father made sure of that. The trust is ironclad. It goes to you and you alone when you turn 21. Relief flooded through me, but Mr. Dalton wasn't finished. However, I need you to do something important. Play along. Let Victor think he's winning. Don't fight him directly, don't reveal what you know. Just act confused and compliant until your birthday. He paused. Can you do that? I thought about the past 2 years, about every moment of control and manipulation I had endured. Yes, I said. I can do that. For the first time since Victor entered our lives, I had an ally, and more importantly, I had a plan. My 21st birthday was 2 months away. Victor grew increasingly restless, checking the mail every day, intercepting phone calls, asking constant questions about that trust fund situation. I played my role perfectly, acting uncertain and overwhelmed whenever he brought it up. I don't really understand all this legal stuff, I would say, watching relief flash across his face. Meanwhile, I had transferred all official correspondence to a post office box I had rented with cash. Every letter from the bank, every update from Mr. Dalton, went there instead of the house. Victor had no idea what was actually happening behind the scenes. I watched him grow more confident, more certain of his control. He started talking about investments we could make and opportunities for the family. My mother smiled and nodded, completely under his spell. I smiled too, but inside I was counting down the days until I would finally be free from both of them. One night my mother knocked softly on my door. It was late, past midnight, and when I opened it, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Honey, can we talk? She whispered. We sat on my bed, and for a moment she looked like my real mother again, the woman who used to braid my hair and read me stories. You could make things so much easier, she said quietly. If you just worked with Victor instead of against him, we could all be happy. I looked at her carefully. Easier for who, Mom? For him or for you? She flinched like I had slapped her. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked. You married him, but I didn't choose any of this. He's trying to steal what Dad left for me, and you're helping him do it. She stood up, her face hardening. Your father's gone, Calla. Victor is here now, and he's trying to take care of us. She walked to the door, then paused. You'll understand when you're older. She left without waiting for a response, and I sat alone in the darkness, realizing I had already lost her. Victor found my journal. I still don't know how. Maybe he searched my room when I was at school, or maybe my mother told him where to look. He waited until dinner to reveal it, dropping it onto the table beside my plate with a heavy thud. Interesting reading, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Then he opened it and began reading my entries aloud, mocking every word. Victor made me ask permission to use the bathroom. Victor checked my phone again. Victor told Mom I can't go to Aunt Mara's this weekend. He laughed, a cold, cruel sound. You really think you're the victim here, don't you? My mother sat silently, her face pale, but she didn't stop him. I remained perfectly still, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. When he finally finished, I looked him straight in the eye. Are you done? I asked calmly. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe even a hint of uncertainty. He slammed his fist on the table. Watch your tone! But I had already won that moment. He had expected me to break, and I hadn't. My Aunt Mara came to visit the following weekend. She was my father's sister, someone who had always looked out for me. Victor tried to control even that visit, insisting on being present for every conversation. But Aunt Mara was clever. She asked to see my old art projects in the garage, and once we were alone, I slipped her copies of all the documents I had photographed, Victor's file on me, the lawyer's papers, everything. Keep these safe, I whispered. Don't let Mom or Victor know you have them. She folded them carefully into her purse, her face serious. I promise, sweetheart, and if you need me, you call, okay? Anytime, day or night. When we came back inside, Victor was watching us from the kitchen window, his eyes narrow and suspicious. He knew something had happened, but he couldn't prove it. That night at dinner, he was unusually quiet, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Good. Let him wonder. Let him worry. The balance of power was starting to shift. A few days later, Victor cornered me in the hallway outside my room. He moved close, using his height to intimidate me, his voice low and threatening. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed. "Playing your little games, whispering with your aunt. But when I'm finished with you, you'll have nothing. Not a single dollar of that inheritance will belong to you." I met his gaze without flinching, something new and fierce burning in my chest. "We'll see," I said quietly. For the first time since I had known him, Victor looked genuinely uncertain. His confidence wavered, just for a second, because I wasn't afraid anymore. He had pushed and controlled and manipulated for 2 years, expecting me to eventually break down and submit. Instead, I had become stronger, smarter, more determined. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I simply walked past him into my room and closed the door. Through the wood, I heard him breathing heavily, frustrated and confused. The hunter had suddenly realized his prey had claws. My 21st birthday was 3 days away. Victor's entire demeanor changed. Suddenly he was cooking dinner, calling me sweetheart, asking about my day with fake concern. It was nauseating to watch, but I played along perfectly. I smiled, thanked him for the meals, pretended everything was fine. My mother seemed relieved by the sudden peace in the house. "See," she said hopefully, "when you cooperate, everything is better." I nodded and agreed, all while counting down the hours until midnight on my birthday. Mr. Dalton had confirmed everything was in place. The trust would transfer automatically at 12:01 a.m. directly into an account only I could access. Victor had no idea his window of opportunity was rapidly closing. He was so focused on his plan, so convinced of his own cleverness, that he couldn't see he had already lost. I watched him across the dinner table, smiling his fake smile, and thought about how satisfying it would be when reality finally hit him. On my 21st birthday, I woke up to a congratulatory email from the bank. The trust fund had transferred exactly as planned. Every single dollar was now solely in my name, completely secure and legally protected. I forwarded a copy to Mr. Dalton, who would file it with the court to ensure Victor could never challenge it. I got ready for school like it was any ordinary day, eating breakfast while Victor cheerfully talked about discussing some important matters that evening. He had no idea everything had already changed. At lunch, I checked my account one more time just to make absolutely sure. The money was there, real and untouchable. But what I hadn't told anyone, not even Mr. Dalton yet, was what else I had discovered in the trust documents. My father hadn't just left me money. He had left me something far more valuable, something that would change everything. I saved that revelation for later, for the perfect moment when Victor would finally understand just how completely he had lost. That evening, Victor was on a phone call in his office when I heard him suddenly shout. I walked closer to listen. "What do you mean it already transferred?" he yelled. "That's impossible. The birthday is today. I should have had time to." He stopped mid-sentence, probably realizing he was revealing too much. There was silence as he listened to whoever was on the other end, then a string of curses I had never heard him use before. When he emerged from his office, his face was purple with rage. He found me in the living room, reading calmly on the couch. "You already have the money," he said, his voice shaking. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied simply. He exploded, shoving a chair out of his way, his carefully controlled mask finally cracking completely. "Everything in this house is mine," he screamed. "You're nothing but an ungrateful, manipulative little." I stood up, my voice steady and cold. "You're absolutely right, Victor. Everything in this house is yours." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Or rather, it was yours. The next morning, a courier delivered a large envelope to Victor while he was having his coffee. I watched from the doorway as he opened it, watched his face drain of all color as he read the contents. It was an eviction notice, signed by me and certified by Mr. Dalton's law firm. But it was the attached document that made his hands start shaking, the property deed, showing that Calla Harper was the legal owner of the house we lived in. My father hadn't just left me a trust fund. He had left me the house itself, purchased years before he died and placed in a trust that would transfer to me on my 21st birthday. Victor had been living in my property for 2 years, not his own. Every rule he had enforced, every boundary he had crossed, had been in a home that was never really his. "This is impossible," he whispered. "The mortgage, the paperwork, your mother said." "My mother assumed," I interrupted. "Because you asked her to, but she never actually checked the deed." "Neither did you." Victor's eyes were wild now, desperate. "You can't do this. Your mother and I are married. She has rights." Mr. Dalton stepped into the house behind me. "Actually, the property trust is separate from marital assets." Calla's father made absolutely certain of that. "You have 30 days to vacate." My mother came home an hour later to find Victor packing frantically, throwing clothes into suitcases and screaming about lawyers and injustice. When she saw the eviction notice on the kitchen counter, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "Calla, please," she begged. "He'll have nowhere to go. We'll have nowhere to go." I looked at the woman who was supposed to protect me, who had instead chosen a manipulative stranger over her own daughter. "That's not my problem, Mom," I said quietly. "You both tried to steal my inheritance to control every aspect of my life. You stood by while he turned this house into a prison." She grabbed my hands. "I made a mistake. I see that now, but he's my husband. I love him." "Then go with him," I said, pulling away. "But this is my house now, and he's not welcome here anymore." I paused, then added something I had been thinking about for days. "You can stay, Mom. If you leave Victor, if you're willing to go to therapy and work on our relationship, you can stay. But you have to choose, him or me. You can't have both." Victor stormed out 3 days later, still shouting threats about lawsuits and revenge that would never materialize. His carefully constructed world was collapsing. Days later, I heard through Aunt Mara that his business had fallen apart too. Several investors had pulled out after learning about his attempts to forge documents and manipulate a client's trust fund, my trust fund. Aunt Mara had quietly shared the evidence I had given her with the right people. Victor's reputation was destroyed, his career finished. The man who had tried to control everything now controlled nothing. He had built his life on manipulation and deception, and it had all crumbled in a matter of days. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet sense of justice. He had come into our lives pretending to be someone he wasn't, and now the mask was gone forever. Sometimes I wondered if he ever realized that his own greed and need for control had been his undoing. If he had just been genuine, if he had just treated me with basic respect, none of this would have happened. My mother stayed. She chose me over Victor, though I could see it broke something in her to do it. We started going to therapy together the next week, sitting in uncomfortable silence in a counselor's office, trying to rebuild what had been shattered. One session, about a month after Victor left, my mother finally broke down completely. "I thought I needed him," she sobbed. "After your father died, I felt so lost, so scared. Victor made me feel safe and taken care of. I didn't realize I was letting him take over everything, including my relationship with you." She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I'm so sorry, Calla. I chose him over you, and I'll never forgive myself for that." I didn't forgive her immediately. I couldn't. The hurt went too deep, but I recognized that she was finally seeing clearly, finally understanding what she had allowed to happen. "You didn't need Victor, Mom," I said quietly. "You needed yourself. You needed to be strong on your own." She nodded, tears still falling. It would be a long road to healing, maybe years, but at least we had started walking it together. Months later, I sat in what had been my father's study, now fully mine. Sunlight poured through the window, warm and bright, making the room glow. I had changed so much since that horrible day in the kitchen when Victor demanded I sign away my future. I was stronger now, more confident, more aware of my own worth. My inheritance hadn't been about money, though the financial security was real and appreciated. The true inheritance was something my father had given me long before he died: resilience, self-respect, and the understanding that I never needed to accept someone else's control over my life. He had protected me even from beyond the grave, making sure I would have the resources and the independence to stand on my own. Victor had thought he could own me, could manipulate me into giving up everything my father had worked to provide. He had been wrong. All I inherited was freedom, freedom from control, freedom from fear, freedom to become exactly who I was meant to be. I looked around the study, at the books and photographs and memories that filled every corner, and smiled. This was home again, finally, and I was finally completely free.